So thank you all for being here for the Changing the Culture of White Body Supremacy presentation. Here, thank you very much for being here. And now Gail will take us on our next slide.
We recognize and acknowledge that the greater Philadelphia area stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenape-Hoking, the traditional homeland of the Lenape, also called Lenni Lenape or Delaware Indians. These are the people who, during the 1680s, negotiated with William Penn to facilitate the founding of the colony of Pennsylvania. Their descendants today include the Delaware tribe and the Delaware Nation of Oklahoma, among others. The photo is of a statue in Philadelphia commissioned by United American Indians of the Delaware Valley and historic East Market. It was installed in 1994 and entitled Tamanend.
Thank you. We, the Greater Philadelphia Area Branch, offer this gathering today based on the work of Resmaa Menakem. In his book, My Grandmother's Hands, Mr. Menakem is a somatic therapist who has a large body of work that is as impressive as it is extensive. He brings a unique perspective to the topic of racial justice with an emphasis on trauma and its effect on our bodies. We as a branch are only beginning to dip our toes into this powerful body of work. If today our presentation encourages you to listen to one of his many podcasts, follow him on Medium, or check out his ongoing courses, we will have met one of our goals. My name is Tina Shelton, and I am getting us started today. Please join me in taking a breath. As a group, we are learning settling techniques and plan to use them today as needed. We choose to speak kindly and with humility as we are not experts in this field. We expect that we and our audience are doing the best that we can, and we are all striving to act from the best part of ourselves. In addition, we recognize that we are fallible human beings and we will make mistakes. We also have thick skin. We can handle being told that we are in error, and we will keep trying. In the interest of group facilitation, our goal is to stay on track today and to be available for longer discussions of ways we might improve in a smaller setting. Next slide. Our goal is not perfection, but progress. We expect that we're going to make mistakes, and we strive for accountability. And we are fallible human beings with thick skin. Anna Santoyo is our moderator, and she's going to help us keep on track. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will be sharing my information, my email on the chat if you have any additional comments or discussion that you would like to give us afterwards, after the workshop. Thank you all.
Thanks, Anna. We start with the premise that we are all racist. Our present culture is accurately described as racist. We recognize that there are always those who have resisted, including those who were being oppressed. Our culture is learning that race is a concept that was created to oppress. Many people with varying degrees of melanin in their skin have been labeled as other, and then assimilated like waving a magic wand when the powerful deemed it was more advantageous to bring them to the other team, so to speak, all while keeping those at the bottom in separate groups to keep them from working together, as the Poor People's Campaign so eloquently describes and works to change. For some time now, our culture has been grappling with racial justice and attempting to make the world better for folks with lots of melanin in their beautiful skin. But it is stating the obvious to say that we are not moving quickly. One basic reason is that we are approaching this topic with our problem-solving brains. You can take the slide off now, thanks. By doing so, we are leaving out our survival, instinctive brain responses. Mr. Menakem brings what he calls the lizard brain, and other people call the limbic brain, to this discussion. When danger is perceived, the lizard brain or the limbic brain short circuits the cortex and initiates fight or flight or freeze responses. We can think about this using our fist. When we are in survival mode, the cortex is pushed out of the way by our limbic brain, and our limbic brain is doing its push-ups, it's exercising, it is putting us in survival mode, it's fighting, it's freezing, it's doing everything that it needs to do to keep us safe, to keep us safe. When we're not threatened, then our cortex is there to help us plan our dinner, to help us make decisions, help us do whatever we need to do. And our limbic system is quiet. Of course, we don't really have two brains, but that's just one way that people have to explain our primitive brain and our more fully evolved brain. Our bodies sense danger that is not only to our physical selves, but also to our values, our beliefs, and our emotional lives. Those of us who follow the news saw this recently in the clear example of Professor Nicole Hannah Jones, when she, who was initially denied tenure from the University of North Carolina, she became well known after being the lead author of the 1619 Project. We watched as the media gave us a window into her livelihood being threatened. Luckily, Professor Jones was ready. She had a settled body, and she knew that she had choices when a racist donor put her work in jeopardy. We're hearing a lot about trauma these days, and it has taken on negative connotation. Let us remind ourselves that trauma is a very effective tool of safety and survival. It is our body's protective response to an event. This threat may be actual or it may be perceived. It does not matter to our bodies whether we see a tiger on the savannah or we watch our boss yell at a coworker for a behavior that we would never engage in. Both can send hormones racing through our body. The trauma can manifest as fight or flight or freeze or a combination or even some other survival responses. Or it may get stuck in our bodies as something called traumatic retention. Slide, please. Again, trauma is never chosen. It is not a failing. It is a coping. We now know from the study of epigenetics, a growing and fascinating field of study, that the trauma that creates stress hormones to course through our bodies also causes effects to be handed down genetically. We encourage you to learn more about this field of study, both how it affects the potential for racial justice, as well as peace studies in general. We also know from the field of neuroscience that the process of othering is an evolutionary biological process. It has protective function. It is not, however, the same as racism. We have a basic tendency to see the world as us and them. As peace activists, we actively engage in breaking down barriers, including those created by othering. Next slide. BeyondConflict.org reminds us that we come into the world, next slide, Anna. We come into the world with a tendency to categorize people into groups But deciding who is us and who is them is extraordinarily flexible in humans. This tendency towards tribalism is baked into us, but racism is a cultural construct. Children are not born racist. It's a quote from Emile Bruno. Thank you. Neuroscience and research in trauma healing are all pointing us in the direction to understand that white body supremacy lives not only in our thinking brains, but in our bodies. Our healing must also not only be in our thinking brains, although that's important, but in our chemical, breathing, reacting, feeling bodies. Changing our culture to become anti-racist involves not only our thinking brains, but our bodies. Slide, please. The way out of this mess involves all of us to begin with our own body. Our bodies are important parts of the solution. This book is not one just to read, it's one to experience. All of our bodies are where changing the status quo must begin. Thank you. I get to introduce Gail Simons now, who will tell us more about the myth of race.
So Resmaa Menakem, building on Dr. Joy DeGruwy's 2005 book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, describes how the history of white and Black trauma in America are intertwined. The white immigrants from England and other European countries fleeing from torture in their homelands fostered that same torture on the bodies of Black immigrants yanked from Africa and made to work on the farms and plantations in America. At first, both Black and white workers toiled side by side, but eventually plantation owners divided Black and white workers, even giving some poor white people positions as plantation overseers. Mr. Menakem points out that race is a myth, an idea made up in the 17th century. As he shows, whiteness is one of the biggest and most long-running scams ever perpetrated. He quotes Toni Morrison, who said, "There is no such thing as race, none. Scientifically, anthropologically, racism is a construct, a social construct, and it has benefits. Money can be made of it, and people who don't like themselves can feel better because of it. It can describe certain kinds of behavior that are wrong and misleading. It was only in the late 17th century that white Americans began to formalize a culture of white body supremacy. For America to outgrow the bondage of white body supremacy, white Americans need to imagine themselves in Black, red, and brown bodies and experience what these bodies had to endure." Next, Sylvia Metzler will talk about how to settle and safeguard our bodies.
Thank you, Gail. And I'd like to start talking about settling and safeguarding our bodies with two quotes. The first is from Oprah Winfrey. "Breathe, let go. Remind yourself that this very moment is the only one you know you have for sure." And the second, by Marnita Schroed, "Healing is a practice. It's not a one-time thing or an idea. If I get up and do a bunch of exercises and repeat them, over time my muscles will get stronger. Healing is a practice just like that." Thank you. So Mr. Menakem stresses how important it is to be able to settle our bodies. As individuals and as groups, we will be much more effective as forces for good in the world if we are calm, alert, and fully present. But it takes practice to learn these skills. In the book, he addresses white people, Black people, and police officers with why this is important for each group to overcome white body supremacy. An important point to remember is that learning to settle our bodies is not about reducing stress in our lives, but learning how to handle it. He goes on to list 5 pages of exercises for us to try on, and then to continue to practice daily the ones that we found most helpful. I want to show you just a few examples. He asks us to try a balancing bird as a way of calming ourselves. He suggests various body practices and breathing exercises. And 5 more pages, which I'm not going to go into, but when you read the book, I urge you to really practice them and figure which ones are helpful to you. He also stresses self-care in general. Enough sleep, good nutrition, plenty of water, especially in these hot days of summer, regular exercise, simple pleasures, and some form of meditation, meditation, prayer, or chanting. As a result, we will, quote, lose our cool less often and not let situations trigger the fight, flee, or freeze responses. A calm, settled body is a foundation for health, for healing, for helping others, and for changing the world. Caring for our bodies, our psyche, and our souls is not optional, says Mr. Menakem. It's crucial to our health, sanity, happiness, and healing, and it is an essential part of being human. Now I'd like to introduce Pam Albright, who will continue our discussion of My Grandmother's Hands. Pam?
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm going to talk a little bit about the wisdom of clean pain. Slide 11, please. And I'm going to start with a quote by Susan Raphael. Self-care is the constant practice of not letting more pain accumulate. It's about continually remembering that our lives are of value. It is the active process of settling our nervous system so that we have more access to the present moment. Thank you. Resmaa Menakem talks about clean pain and dirty pain in terms of how we deal with our trauma. And we all do have a history of trauma, whether it's intergenerational, historical, if not current trauma. Healing trauma involves recognizing, accepting, and moving through pain, clean pain. Often this means facing what we don't want to face, what we've been avoiding. By walking into that pain and experiencing it fully and moving through it, we metabolize it and put an end to it. In the process, we also grow. We create more room in our nervous system for flow and coherence, and we build our capacity for further growth. This healing happens in our bodies, not in our heads. And when we come out of this process, we will feel relief and our bodies will feel more settled and present. On the other hand, dirty pain involves following the paths of avoidance, blame, and denial. When we respond from our most wounded parts, become cruel or violent, or physically or emotionally run away, we experience dirty pain. We also create more of it for ourselves and for others. A key factor in the perpetuation of white body supremacy is our refusal to experience clean pain around the myth of race by choosing silence or avoidance. This only serves to prolong the pain. We white progressives have our own forms of dirty pain, including white guilt, white savior complex, such as let me help you or I can fix this, ugly sympathy, such as you poor victims, and taking over all the energy in the room by freaking out or bursting into tears. This is also a form by which white progressives demonstrate white fragility. Many of us who are white progressives think we deserve a free pass because we see ourselves as the, quote, good ones, unquote. But white supremacy is itself a form of dirty pain. As a white progressive, I benefit as much from the structural inequalities of white supremacy as a white conservative or a white supremacist. Everyone moves through clean pain in their own way. But the process can be described and navigated and involves 5 steps or anchors. Each one anchors us in the present and in our bodies. We know that we need to practice the 5 anchors when we sense a conflict building, or when a conflict looks and feels like it's escalating, and we feel discomfort in what Mr. Menakem describes as our soul nerve or the vagus nerve. Okay, the soul or vagus nerve is a unifying organ of our entire nervous systems, reaching into our throats, lungs, hearts, stomachs, livers, spleens, pancreases, kidneys, and guts. It's where we experience love, compassion, fear, grief, dread, sadness, loneliness, hope, empathy, anxiety, caring, disgust, despair, and many other things that make us human. With attention and patience, we can learn to work with our soul nerve, consciously and deliberately relaxing our muscles, settling our bodies, and soothing ourselves during difficult or high-stress situations. We can also, with practice, learn to use our soul nerve to activate and mobilize our bodies on demand. Slide 12, please. So I'm going to go over the 5 anchors. Anchor 1 is soothe yourself to quiet your mind, calm your heart, and settle your body. Anchor 2, simply notice the sensations, vibrations, and emotions in your body instead of reacting to them. Anchor 3, accept the discomfort and notice when it changes instead of trying to flee from it. Anchor 4, stay present and in our body as you move through the unfolding experience with all of the ambiguity and uncertainty, and discharge any energy that remains. Okay, so for anchor 5, this is to be used only after you've worked through the conflict or disengaged from it, or agreed to stop focusing on it for now. So after you've been in the heat of a conflict, this energy remains bottled up in your body. For your physical and emotional well-being, you need to discharge this as soon as you reasonably can. Vigorous exercise for at least 20 minutes can be very effective. Okay, thank you. And next I would like to introduce Sylvia Metzler, who will explain our upcoming role play.
Well, while they were working on that, I'm going to say what I was going to say at the beginning, so just in case. Now that Pam has explained the 5 anchors to us, we would like to demonstrate their use in 2 role plays. The first role play will feature a conversation between 2 WILPF members, Pam and Tina, who are not aware of or not using Mr. Menakem's 5 anchors. The second one will show the change in Pam's response to Tina's unconscious racism when she remembers to use the 5. So hopefully, here we go.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. How's that? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, let's see if the sound came through.
We would like to demonstrate their use
Got it.
Did you hit sound? Yes?
Yes.
in 2 role plays. The first role play will feature a conversation between 2 WILPF members, Pam and Tina, who are not aware of or not using Mr. Menakem's 5 anchors. The second one will show the change in Pam's response to Tina's unconscious racism when she remembers to use the 5 anchors. Here we go with the first role play.
Hi, Pam. How is your WILPF book club going?
Oh, great, Tina. We're reading My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem and learning how deeply racism can be embedded in our bodies.
Oh, good for you. So important. You know, I took a course in race relations some years ago and found it to be so helpful. I even keep a picture of Dr. King in my kitchen, and my kids find it so inspiring. So I want to thank you for the invitation, but I won't be joining the club. It's not on my agenda.
Oh my God, Tina, do you know how racist you sound? I can't believe that you're a WILPF member and can be so ignorant. No wonder racism continues to be such a problem with so-called Progressives like you.
Racist, really? Pam, I have several Black friends and coworkers. I don't appreciate you trying to make me feel guilty either, after all I've done to help Black people.
Well, you're just proving my point right there. You really need to join us and read My Grandmother's Hands.
Pam, what did I say? I'm clueless.
The next role play will repeat the opening dialogue between Pam and Tina, but just as Pam is ready to angrily explode again, her alter ego, played by myself, will remind and encourage her to use the 5 anchors in her interactions with Tina. Here's our second role play.
Hi, Pam. How's your WILPF book club going?
Oh, great, Tina. We're reading My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, and we're learning how deeply racism is embedded in our bodies.
Good for you. So important. You know, I took a course in race relations some years ago and found it to be so helpful. I even keep a picture of Dr. King in my kitchen, and my kids find it so inspiring. So I wanted to thank you for the invitation, but I won't be joining the book club. It's just not on my agenda.
I don't like where this is headed, but I'm so pissed.
Whoa, stop, calm down. Just breathe. Now think of something safe and soothing. A glass of wine, a bouquet of flowers. Pet your dear dogs, Jake or Poppy.
Okay.
Good. Now notice what sensations you are feeling and where you're feeling them in your body. You feel cold or constricted. You feel weakness or trembling. Stay with them. Don't run from the discomfort. Just notice it and notice when it starts to change and go away. Now think, how do I want this interaction to go? Fight, flee, or freeze, or something else?
I want to stay with it. Let me try again. Tina, I thought I had learned all about racism too, but I'm learning so much about how white body supremacy is still causing oppression and injustice for our Black brothers and sisters. I'm realizing that I don't need to feel guilty for the white privilege that I have, but I do have a responsibility to use it to work for change in myself and in society. To tell you the truth, sometimes we're even finding it hard to talk about in our book club. We're realizing that this stuff will take a long time to change, but we can start. So if you change your mind about joining our book club, we'd love to have you, Tina.
Well, it is hard to talk about sometimes. I'll give you that. You've given me some things to think about, Pam. Thanks for telling me about the book club.
Well, that was interesting. I think I'll take my dog for a long run now.
We hope these role plays have helped us to recognize how racism has become deeply embedded in all of us, how we too often have become defensive and fragile when confronted about it, and how to use Mr. Menakem's 5 anchors to calm ourselves in difficult situations so that the outcome is positive and constructive.
You're muted, Sylvia. Sylvia, you're muted.
Thank you, Pam and Tina. And now I would like to continue our discussion of My Grandmother's Hands with Mr. Menakem's advice on harmonizing with other bodies. Can I have the next slide, please?
Yes.
This is going to be a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it says, "An individual has not started living until he or she can rise above the narrow confines of his or her individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity." Thank you. So we learned in earlier chapters and parts of the book how to settle and safeguard our bodies individually. Now, Mr. Menakem is teaching that Black, white, and police bodies all need to learn to be more comfortable and settled with one another. Healing with other human beings requires us to respect, regard, and be in harmony with other bodies. He recommends that we start this practice only with groups we know and trust, like family or friends, with simple but effective exercises. For example, ask the group to hum for 10 seconds to harmonize our bodies. Other exercise examples are keening, singing together, rocking, rubbing our bellies or solar plexus, a silent walk together, or line or folk dances. But then he then alerts us to the kinds of reactions we may have. They could be pleased, grateful, amused, delighted, or confused, suspicious, worried, afraid, offended, or even angry. But he cautions, just be present, use the anchors, and don't try to convince or coerce others. After we become comfortable using these exercises, we can move on to work with larger groups that we know and trust, like a church group, a block club, etc. Can I have the next slide, please? Our bodies guide and follow other bodies, so a settled nervous system encourages other nervous systems to settle. To sum up, our public discourse, our media, and our policing all unsettle our bodies far more than they help to settle them. A settled body helps other bodies and encourages them to settle. Give these bodies the right context and encouragement, and they will begin to harmonize as well. When over time enough bodies heal from trauma and learn to harmonize, that harmony can turn into culture. Because a settled nervous system encourages other nervous systems to settle, a calm, settled presence is the foundation for changing the world. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it back to Pam Albright, who's going to give us some examples of how a centered body is important when we are working for change in the world. Pam?
Thank you, Sylvia. If I'm going to talk briefly about body-centered activism. Healing from white supremacy begins with our bodies, but it doesn't end there. We cannot individualize our way out. In order to heal the collective body that is America, we also need social activism that is body-centered, collective action that heals. Next slide, please. We need to join in that collective action with settled bodies and with psyches that are willing to metabolize clean pain. As Mr. Menakem stresses, at its best, activism is a form of healing. Thank you. Bringing a settled body to any situation encourages the bodies around us to settle as well. In his book, Mr. Menakem described photos from civil rights actions of the 1950s, which showed people with settled bodies and focused minds. One of them was of Elizabeth Eckford, a 15-year-old Black girl carrying a notebook. In 1957, she tried to enter the all-white Little Rock Central High School in order to receive the same education as white 15-year-olds. From the photo, you can see that her body was settled and her mind was focused, even though she was being pursued by a furious, jeering mob. So of course she had to feel frightened. But even when frightened, a settled body is able to access its resilience. In videos of James Baldwin and Malcolm X, Mr. Menakem could see that they both had settled bodies and focused minds as well. Now I would like to introduce Louise Lisi, who will join me in talking about whiteness without supremacy.
You're muted, Louise. Thank you.
Nobody's Free Until Everybody's Free by Fannie Lou Hamer.
To sit back and do nothing is to cooperate with the oppressor by Jane Elliott. We know that race is a myth created to preserve power. It will take a culture change to see Black bodies or brown bodies as accepted standards of beauty and accomplishment. White supremacy culture only recognizes white beauty and white accomplishment as the standard against which all are judged.
Quoting Resmaa Menakem, if America is to grow out of white body supremacy, the transformation must largely be led by white Americans. This transformation cannot rely primarily on laws, procedures, policies, standards, and strategies. We've already seen how these are no match for culture. For genuine transformation to take place, white Americans must acknowledge the racialized trauma, move through clean pain, and grow up. African Americans and African police need to do the same. And for now, we each need to do it in our own culture and in our own way.
We all need to take care of ourselves in order to help care for others. Each culture needs to create body-centered rituals and practices that promote self-care and collective wellness. And these practices need to be passed on from person to person, especially from parents to children. These practices help our bodies to slow down and settle. They help us to have fewer and less intense reflexive responses, and they help us to have more energy to love, to have compassion, and to give to others.
WILPFers will love Mr. Menakem's statements about the necessity to move away from society's extreme emphasis on individuals and individual achievement. There also needs to be an equal emphasis on cooperation and on the collective good. This is necessary for a sane culture without supremacy to take hold and prosper. We may have more trouble with Mr. Menakem's idea that many well-meaning social activists overlook the importance of culture. These activists concentrate on strategy without also working to dislodge white body supremacy from our culture. More than anything, culture creates a sense of belonging, and belonging makes our bodies feel safe. That is why culture matters so deeply to us. We humans like to belong.
Quoting Mr. Menakem, you know how crucial culture is to human life and to the human body. Yet, white Americans have not yet created any form of anti-white supremacy culture. White Americans who seek to undo white body supremacy have organizations. They have ideas and strategies and goals. They have initiatives. They have energy, conviction, and hope. But they have little sense of community and no culture to build and support community. This needs to change. White allies must build culture because culture trumps almost anything else.
When Resmaa Menakem talks to people about whiteness without supremacy, some people in the audience say, Resmaa, I'm totally with you. I do not know how to do it. It is not for Black or brown bodies to tell white bodies how to build a culture without supremacy. We as white people must create new expressions of culture that call out, reject, and undermine white supremacy.
Mr. Menakem stresses that white people need to do their own work of creating a culture of whiteness without supremacy. In his book, he does include many ideas and suggestions, however. We encourage you to read and experience the book and to think about the many action ideas that he has.
There are white leaders for whiteness without supremacy. A few are Tim Wise, Robin DiAngelo, Jim Wallace, Port Kivell, and Peggy McIntosh. You probably can name others who are working to create a culture without supremacy.
One example of possible new actions is names. We can name our children after African Americans who have worked or are working for freedom. We can name streets and buildings after African Americans. What about a W.E.B. Du Bois Street in Beverly Hills or a Harriet Tubman building in Scottsdale?
Our new culture would accept all people, including Black, Brown, First Nation, Asian, as all representing beauty and accomplishment. Quoting Resmaa Menakem, we Americans have an opportunity and an obligation to recognize the trauma embedded in our bodies, to accept and mobilize the clean pain of healing, and to move through and out of our trauma. This will enable us to mend our hearts and bodies. If we do this, both as individuals and as a nation, America may become a country in which human possibilities are freed and we discover each other. The work we did as a branch, exploring and experiencing Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, was very meaningful to us. We hope our sharing was of value to you. We are now open to comments and questions, which we invite you to put in the chat. Marlena Santoyo will moderate the discussion.
You have to unmute. Oh, there we go.
Okay, I'm going to start with one question meant for Tina. Tina, what can healing look and feel like for white people so that we can show up in more effective and grounded ways?
Thanks, Marlena. And just for anyone else, please go ahead and add your questions to the chat. If it's capitals or say the word question if you can, and we're getting used to that. That seems to work. Marlena, thanks for the question. It's it has to do with settling our bodies, and also with some of the things that our previous speaker, Paul Cavell, was talking about in terms of associating, us going to places, people with white skin, go to the places where people with lots of melanin in their skin gather and be a part of that, and us joining. Don't ask the question, what do I do to get them to come to me? But go and create those bridges. Say your question one more time and make sure I got it, because I'm not sure I answered it completely. I think that was the second part. Go ahead.
Okay. What can healing look and feel like for us white folks so that we can show up in more effective and grounded ways?
So another thing that healing looks like is that we get less, we take offense less often. We are more comfortable when people say, that stinks, or you're doing that wrong, or, that's not right. That's not how people of color look at things. Or, are you being a little white here? Your white fragility is showing, Tina. Then we would feel less affronted by that. Wouldn't bother us as much. We would just say, yeah, I need to learn something here. That's one thing that would look like.
Thank you. We have another question, which is, can you differentiate for us the difference between clean and dirty pain?
Yes, I can do that, but if Sylvia, do you want to take a stab at it, or do you want me to?
Actually, I don't, because that is a concept I am still struggling trying to understand, despite having read the book.
Yeah.
So that's why this book, it really is important to read it as a group, because there's going to be concepts that you really need to work on with each other. So I'm going to pass that to somebody else.
Okay. So clean pain is what we do when we fully experience uncomfortable feelings. And a lot of therapists are talking about this using different words, but we're really talking about staying with it, not shutting down, not running away, not distracting ourselves, with alcohol or busyness or doing all those things. Clean pain is feeling the feelings, saying it's okay, and then allowing that to move out of our body, because we have that, because it's stored in our bodies in an unhealthy way. We need to experience it so we can move it on, so it can move on. And then dirty, so the dirty pain is,
And I say,
go ahead, Louise.
and the dirty pain is really what continues the whole systemic racism, that instead of being able to look at racism as a myth that was created to give more power, I'm just going to keep beating everybody up and keep staying in my own little narrow space and keep saying I hate everybody who's not me. That's...
Unfortunately,
before we go,
I know that this has been I know we could talk about this for really truly for hours. We enjoyed this book club so much. We enjoyed our company and being able to be vulnerable with each other, with some of our own discomfort around this really important issue, and just being able to connect with everyone in our communities more effectively. But at this point, I'm afraid we're going to have to go with Marlena to action steps and move forward. But please do email me if you have any more questions or comments, and we'd love to continue the discussion with the rest of our sisters and brothers here in this call and elsewhere. Thank you. Marlena?
thank you. Thanks, Anna. So some action steps, which you can see in the slide, are read my grandmother's hands. We hope you will indeed want to take advantage of what Resmaa Menakem, and particularly advantageous if you do this within community. For sure you will love it, as did we. A second step is SURG, or showing up for racial justice. Find a group near you, and that is available for all of us. And thirdly, support and join your local branch of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign, which is now co-chaired nationally by Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis and Reverend Dr. William Barber. And lastly, but certainly not least, we ask that you adopt the actions within the resource list for dismantling white supremacy, soon to be available on WILPF website, or by also emailing WILPF, and you can see the URL there. Thank you for the final slide. And now, our thanks to those of you who submitted questions, to each of our presenters, and to all who attended the Greater Philadelphia Branch Workshop. Good night, and enjoy the rest of our 34th Triennial Congress.
Thanks to our tech support as well. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
So don't click leave. Obviously, it's a Zoom call. Darian, I think we're calling on you because we've reached our time limit. What's next?
Thank you very much. We're going to have the Raging Grannies on in just a moment. So our thanks to the Philadelphia branch for their presentation that many people have found to be extremely helpful. We have to be real that we all have bodies, and our bodies are an important part of our entire being. We cannot work on any one level. We want to integrate the physical, the intellectual, the spiritual, the emotional, and any other levels you may have available. So we'll be proceeding with the Raging Grannies in about 4 minutes. And in the meanwhile, let's stop recording.